huffing and cursing and yelling, "Stop, nigger!" "We better go home, Ben," said Jacob. "I'm not kidding you." "No," I said. "We're going after him. Come on. I dare you." I knew Jacob would lay down his life before taking off in the face of a dare. Sure enough, he followed me. We kept far enough back so as not to be seen. I had not been a very religious boy up till then, but I found myself praying for George Pearson to get away. Please God, I thought, make George run fast. The men chased him all the way to the end of Court Street, out past the ice house. As they went along, a couple more men joined the chase. George seemed to be getting away. Then, from out of nowhere, a bucket came sailing out of the ice house door, tangling his feet and tripping him up. Within seconds, the men were on George. Leon Reynolds punched him right in his face. The man next to him hocked up a big wad of spit and let it fly. Another man reached down, grabbed George by the testicles, and twisted his hand. "Holy God," Jacob whispered in the bushes where we'd taken shelter. "They're gonna kill him, Ben. I swear to God." The men yanked George up by one arm and set him stumbling in front of them. They taunted and teased and pushed him toward the swampy woods behind the ice house. One of them had a torch. Then another torch was lit. "We gotta do something," I said to Jacob. "We gotta. I'm serious, boy." "You crazy? What in hell can we do? They'll twist our balls off, too." "Run home and get your daddy," I said. "I'll try to keep up with him." Jacob looked at me, plainly trying to gauge whether his departure now would mean he had failed to live up to my earlier dare, but finally he ran for help. Leon Reynolds yanked George up hard by his ear. I found my hand clutching at the side of my own head in sympathy. Two men lifted George as easily as if he were a cloth doll. Blood poured from his mouth, along with a load of bile and vomit. One man held George at the waist, while another pushed and pulled his head up and down to make him perform a jerky bow. "There you go, nigger boy. Now you're bowing and showing the respect you should." Then, leaning in with one firm tug, Leon Reynolds pulled George's ear clean off his head. Chapter 17. I wanted to throw up. I stood ankle-deep in the muck of the swamp, batting at the cloud of mosquitoes that whined around my face and arms. I was hiding as best I could behind a tangle of brambly vines and swamp grass, all alone and completely petrified. In no time at all, the men had fashioned a rope into a thick noose with a hangman's knot. It took even less time to sling the rope over the middle fork of a sizable sycamore tree. The only sound in those woods was the awful grunting of the men, the steady metallic chant of the cicadas, and the loud beating of my heart. "You know why you being punished, boy?" shouted one of the men. There was no response from George Pearson. He must have fainted from the beatings, or maybe the pain of losing his ear. "We don't appreciate boasting. We don't appreciate it from no nigger boy. Now, come on, Willie. Ain't it a little rough to throw a boy a rope party just for shooting off his stupid-ass mouth?" said another. "You got another suggestion, Earl?" Willie said. "What other tonic would you recommend?" I looked around for Jacob. Surely he'd had time to get home and come back with his father. The men carried George to the sandy ground underneath the sycamore. One of them held up his head while the others slid the rope around his neck. I didn't know what I could do. I was just one boy. I wasn't strong enough to take on one of these men, much less all of them. But I had to do something. I couldn't just hide like a jackrabbit in the woods and watch them hang George Pearson. So I finally moved out of the shadows. I guess the slosh of my feet in swamp water turned their heads. I stood revealed in the light of the moon and their torches. "Would you look a here," said Willie. "Who the hell is this?" said one of his friends. "Ain't but a little old boy, come out to give us a hand." I realized I was shivering now as if this were the coldest night of all time. "Let him go," I squeaked, instantly ashamed of the tremor in my voice. "You followed us out here to help this nigger?" said Willie. "You want us to string you up next to him, boy?" "He did nothing wrong," I said. "He was just talking. I heard him." "Willie, that's Judge Corbett's kid," said a tall, skinny man. "That's right," I said. "He's my daddy. You're all going to be in bad trouble when I tell what you did." They laughed as if I'd told the funniest joke they'd ever heard. "Well, now, correct me if I'm wrong, young Master Corbett," said Willie. "But I believe the law in these parts says if a nigger goes to boasting, his friends and neighbors got every right to throw him a little rope party and teach him how to dance." My throat was so dry I was surprised any sound came out. "But he didn't do anything wrong," I said again. For some reason I thought if I repeated myself, they would see the logic. Willie put on a smile that held not a hint of amusement. "Boys, I believe we have got ourselves a pure D, grade A, #1 junior nigger lover." The other men laughed out loud. Hot tears sprang up in my eyes, but I willed them not to fall. I would not cry in front of these awful bastards, these cowards. I recognized a tall, skinny one as J.T. Mack, the overseer at the McFarland plantation. He slurred his words as if he were drunk. "If this boy is half smart as his daddy, he'll just turn his ass around and march on back home and forget he ever come out here tonight." In 2 steps, Willie was on me, gripping my arm, then my throat. J.T. Mack moved in to grab my other arm. "Hold on, son. You can't go home to Daddy yet. We need a souvenir of your visit." "Come on out of there, Scooter," said J.T. Out of nowhere came a dapper young man in a green and white plaid suit, his hair slicked back with brilliantine. He looked about 16 years old. He carried a wooden box camera on a large tripod, which he set up in the clearing about 10 feet from the motionless body of George Pearson. Scooter stuck his head under the black cloak attached to the camera and then pushed back out. "I can't see nothing. It's too dark. Bring your light in close to his face," he said. The 2 men with torches moved closer, illuminating the shining black skin of George Pearson's face. Scooter put his head back under the cloth. With that, Leon pulled hard on the rope. George Pearson stood straight up, and then he flew off the ground 3 or 4 feet. His eyes opened wide, bulging as if they might explode. His whole face seemed to swell. His body began trembling and jerking. The horror of what I was seeing froze me in place. I felt something warm dripping down my leg and realized I had peed my pants. No one was looking at me now or bothering to hold me. Slowly, I began to back away. "Hope you got a good likeness, Scooter," said J.T. "We'll all be wanting a copy. Something to remember old George by." Everybody hooted and laughed at that one. I turned and ran for my life. Chapter 18. I suppose there might have been one good thing about the punishing Southern-style heat wave that had settled over Washington. That night, Meg had gone to bed wearing her lightest nightgown. As I opened the door to our room, Meg was resting on our bed, pretending to read her leather-bound copy of the Book of Psalms. "Are you speaking to me?" I asked her. You weren't here to speak to until now, she answered without looking up. I leaned down and kissed her, and was relieved that she didn't turn away. Meg was so lovely just then, and I wanted nothing more than to lie down beside her, but it wouldn't be fair, not with the knowledge running around in my head. Meg, I said softly, I have something to tell you. I'm not sure how you're going to take it. Her eyes hardened. I went to the White House tonight, I said. Her eyes flashed. In 1 second, the hardness melted into joy. The White House! She cried. Oh, I knew it. I knew Roosevelt would have to come around. You're one of the best young lawyers in town. How ridiculous of him to have waited this long to offer you a position. It's not a position, I said. The president asked me to take on a mission for him. It could be for a month or two. Meg sat straight up. The psalm slid to the floor with a soft plop. Oh, Ben, you're going to leave us again? Where? Home, I said, to Mississippi, to Eudora. She exhaled sharply. What could the president possibly want you to do in that godforsaken corner of nowhere? I'm sorry, Meg, I said. I can't tell you. I had to give Roosevelt my word. Meg's rage exploded, and she cast about for a suitable weapon. Seizing the bottle of French eau de toilette I had given her for her birthday, she fired it against the wall with such force that it shattered. A dreamy scent of lavender filled the room. Meg, how could I say no? He's the President of the United States. And I'm your wife. I want you to understand something, Ben. When you go back to Mississippi on your mission, you'd best be advised to purchase a one-way ticket, because if you go, there's no point in coming back. I mean that, Ben. So help me. I'm serious. I can't wait for you any longer. I heard a sound behind me. Meg and I turned to discover that we had an audience for this display, Alice and Amelia. Hello, girls, I said. Mama and I are having a talk, an adult talk. Back to bed with both of you now. Meg had already turned her face away from the door. I could see from the heaving of her shoulders that she was crying, and that made me feel awful. I walked the girls back to their room, where I tucked them in, covering them gently with the light cotton sheets that sufficed on hot nights like this. I kissed Amelia, then Alice, then I had to kiss Alice again, and Amelia, in that order, to even things out. As I rose to leave, Amelia threw her skinny arms around me and tugged me back down to her side. Don't go, Papa, she said in a voice so sweet it nearly broke my heart. If you go, we'll never see you again. The moment Amelia said it, I had the terrible thought that my little girl just might be right. Part 2. Homecoming. Chapter 19. I was soon enough reminded of the dangers of the mission I'd undertaken for the President of the United States. 2 days into my journey south, I was in Memphis, about to board the Mississippi and Tennessee train to Carthage, where I would switch to the Jackson and Northern for the trip to Jackson. I had just discovered some truly disturbing reading material. I had been waiting when the Memphis Public Library opened its doors at 9 a.m. A kindly lady librarian had succumbed to one of my shameless winks. She agreed to violate several regulations at once to lend me a number of back issues of the local newspapers, which I agreed to return by mail. I had carefully chosen the most recent issues that carried sensational stories of lynchings on their front pages. Many of those appeared in the Memphis News Scimitar and the Memphis Commercial Appeal. I was instantly confused by one headline that declared, "Colored youth hung by rope and shot by rope." The article explained that after the 15-year-old boy was strung up by his neck, He'd been accused of